Hello, I'm Mobiius, and you're listening to Oscillator One. In today's episode, I sat down with my friend Moris Blak and chatted about his recent tour, the creative process, addiction, making money as an independent artist, and heaps of other things. He's a genuinely excellent human being, and he was one of the first people of any kind of stature to take notice of me and put me on back in early 2020, well before any of the work that I'm now known for existed. It's always a pleasure to catch up with him, and I really hope that you enjoy this chat as much as I did.
Oscillator One.
We are here with debatably the king of industrial bass music. He's been one of my earliest supporters, and he's fresh off of a year of touring the Helsinki Industrial Festival. The Festival Testicle. His own show, The Blood Rave, and of course, a pretty sick last minute opening slot for Ice Peak not too long ago. How are you doing today, man?
That was really cool. I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me 14 hours apart.
Yeah, it's quite a challenge to schedule these sometimes.
Hey, this is why we can never finish our collab, man.
Yes, that and my horrible time management skills.
Yeah, you and me both, brother.
I was wondering, you mentioned that you're like coming back home now and getting readjusted to normal life. But you've been on tour for a lot of this year, right? Or have been touring during it?
Yeah, I went. I had my first real expansive full North American tour from May to June of this past year. I've only kind of played shows around New England, mostly like the New York, Massachusetts, that kind of area. And this is the first time kind of seeing the country, and I was on tour with Watch Out for Snakes, and it was a good experience. And I have been saying on social media that I've been on tour for the past month, but that is not entirely factual. I work a part-time job during the average academic school semester, basically.
Okay.
So I'm still working part-time, but I started stacking up shows every single weekend. And at a certain point, I'm like, well, that fills up a tour poster. Let's call it a tour. October has categorically been my busiest year. Basically, every year I've had any success with this project. I'm the spooky guy. I do horror movie stuff. Yeah. And so I just managed to kind of get all these shows together, and it was just a very tiring month because you know what it's like chasing deadlines for projects. And so I was still working actively on music. I was working my day job. I was playing these shows every weekend. It was pretty intense. And then I had my first out of country experience. I had never left the North American continent until this past month, where I went to Helsinki, Finland, to play the Helsinki Industrial Festival, as you mentioned up top. And that was a wonderful experience, and just one of those man, I wish I could tell my 19-year-old self, this will happen one day. Just focus your shit. You will get there. You know what you're doing. You suck right now, but if you work at it, you'll get there.
Sick. First time out of the country, that's a pretty big step. You mentioned that you didn't have a lot of time to poke around while you were over there, but what was it like going, wait, first to clarify, have you been to Mexico and Canada?
I've been to Canada. I played a show in Quebec City once, and I played a festival over the summer in Calgary. And I mean, yes, that is technically, I should have said it was my first time leaving the North American continent. That would be accurate.
Okay. So what was it like going to a place with English not spoken as the primary language? And I assume they speak a lot of English there, but how was that? Did you have any culture shock, or was it more similar than you thought?
Things were more streamlined. I feel like it's just kind of the touch of Western civilization or whatever it is, like that, just that homogenous culture that has extended from America and Europe, and it was like familiar, but still, it's just like little things almost just felt like being in a surreal universe. And I think part of the reason it felt like a surreal universe is because you know, I did this in between my day job. I only got a couple days off, so like I went there like overnight, and I get to the city. I am delirious from a lack of sleep and just kind of processing this entire experience. But it was really goddamn cool, like meeting all these people from all over Europe who came out. Some people who told me they came out specifically to see me. Like that was like such a huge draw for them. And I'm like, I understand from a statistical analysis, like that my music spreads to different parts of different countries and everything. But to like meet people who are so far away, who have been so touched by my music, that was fantastic. And they were all so nice. I'll say when I went to Quebec City, some people were really mean about the fact that I didn't speak English, like real hostile about it.
About the fact that you didn't speak French.
French, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
well, that's French people for you. Hey.
yeah. Apparently specifically French in Quebec City.
Yeah.
Other than
What are you gonna?
most of the people I met there were fantastic. There were a few very rude people.
Yeah. Well, so it goes. That's amazing though. Like getting to meet people from around the world that are keen on your music.
I've always been impressed and a little jealous by how traveled and worldly you are, at least in comparison to my 33 years on this planet.
Yeah, that's fair enough. A lot of it is just sort of yeeting yourself into the abyss and being like, well, I hope this works out.
Yeah,
And then kind of figuring it out as you go.
I've been historically cowardly about that. I've it's only been in the last like 5 years I've been like, well, I got to take a few more chances, like put some eggs in some baskets, and then really try and make it work, not half-ass things, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's how you got to where you are now. How long have you been making music with this project? It's like 5 years, something like this.
Yeah, with this project, I'd say 5 years. I think it was like 2015. I needed like a constructive outlet to kind of distract myself from the quickly worsening political conditions in the United States. And I had been like trying to fuck with music since high school. Like I used to, mess around with Fruity Loops even before I even understood how to like compose a song together. I would just like, make little loops and like record them and try and emulate like different industrial artists I was kind of into at the time, but I was never really serious about it. It was always kind of like maybe I'll fiddle around with it on the weekends. I never really took the time to learn. I just kind of like picked up a few tricks here and there and just wrote melodies because I think I always had like a knack for like writing melodies and composing stuff together. You get better over time, but I think I had a natural understanding of how to do it just from being a music fan. I think most people who are just really big fans of music eventually figure out like how it's constructed and stuff. I mean, I used to just kind of sit there listening to electronic songs and like listen to how like melodies are layered over each other. I didn't understand at the time that it was everything else, like all the stuff under the hood is where the real like magic was happening. And so I would just make stuff that didn't sound good and be like, well, I don't know why it doesn't sound like other people's stuff. I guess I'll not do it that much. And I don't know, at a certain point, I realized I've always had this dream of being a musician, so let's give it a go. I don't have any other particular skills of use. I went to art school, and I realized that even though drawing was like a big passion of mine for a while, I didn't have the love in it in me anymore for it. But I did have that love for music, so maybe I could channel that and put some real drive into it. And that's when I actually started taking it seriously and trying to understand how to make things that sound good. And I think that early persistence kind of paid off. Like and not even so much like with like listenership, but even just when I really like put my back into it and really tried to understand how this very particular style of music is very uniquely composed. I also started meeting other producers who, like a lot of people who are like starting out kind of at my level or a little bit above, some of whom have like really blown up over the past couple of years. But that was like a really quick community I found, and that really kind of not only gave me the confidence that, like, hey, maybe I'm actually kind of good at this, but also the skill, like they gave me like knowledge and feedback that I could actually put into my music. And because like when I was like in the industrial world, like the industrial world is a little bit like more insular, like people are a little more guarded about the way they make their music. I think it's because most of them don't actually know what they're doing and kind of pick it up on the go and know that their way is their unique way. And that's not the wrong way, but that's why that, it's not the same as like, EDM producers who are like 26 and uploading shit on YouTube. But yeah, that just that element of community was something that like I think I really needed to kind of go forward. And then I had a few songs that got a very, very minor amount of virality in certain communities, and that helped me get out there.
Okay. How did you stumble on this community that you're talking about? Is this like an online community of other industrial leaning
SoundCloud.
artists? SoundCloud.
SoundCloud. Yeah. Because that's like where I found like all the music that like really inspired what Moris Blak is. Like I had some like projects before it, but like never really did anything. But like Moris Blak was very much influenced by all the stuff that came out after Gesaffelstein. Like I was really influenced by like kind of like electro trash stuff and Tudant, like Toutant, like I
I
don't
don't
know.
know it.
He's really good. There's like Noizinski, there's like Neighbor and Cable and Into the Pale Abyss, and there's all these artists doing like these really cool. It sounded industrial, but it was like done with the tools and the fresh knowledge of EDM, and I just found that very interesting, and it was something that I always wanted to combine. And I finally got a clearer picture of what it was, and that's when I kind of zoned into that kind of sound and started networking with those producers. And turns out we all really love Gesaffelstein and Korn. That was like, one of the big linking things between everybody. And why shouldn't you? They both fucking rule. Did I answer your question? I don't even remember where we started on that.
Korn and Gesaffelstein, the goats.
Mm,
Yeah, I just asked like kind of how long your music project had been going on. So I think that pretty much fleshes it out.
yeah.
Uh, so I've been chatting with a few other producers. Like I try to spend a lot of time networking with people and stuff on the internet, and um, so I have some people reach out to me and like ask for advice about things. And somebody reached out and talked to me recently about like feeling really self-conscious about not knowing how to find a sound and feeling like the things that he's making and releasing like don't fit together enough, or I guess it's a process that we've all gone through. And so I was just wondering, as somebody who has a pretty strong sonic identity yourself, like, do you think that there was any sort of struggle that you went through to be like, is this what I want to sound like? Is this it? How does Moris Blak sound? Or were you like, right here, this is what I want?
No. Yeah, okay. First of all, I was going through a musical identity crisis from the age 18 until maybe 2 years into Morris Black. Like I was making things that were like kind of inspired by things I was interested in, but then I would be like interested in something else. And because I didn't have the skills at the time, like the things wouldn't sound cohesive with each other. And that was really frustrating. And I think when I made Morris Black, I kind of sat down and kind of focused in like what elements of things do I want to bring together? Like what am I trying to evoke? And like I always knew that like having modern electronic music and like traditional industrial music were always my two interests, and I wanted to put them together. But like my first two EPs, which I released on Blind Mice Records, which is the record label owned by Pete Crane of the music project Shiver. If you haven't heard of them, check them out. They're awesome. That's SHIV-R. He's great. He's helped launch my career to what it is today. But those two records really just don't sound like I had a unified vision of what I wanted to do, but like my project quickly evolved out of that. I use like a lot more like live drum sounds. It definitely sounded more industrial than like what I'm doing today. And I think I was just kind of experimenting with soundscapes. And the big thing was that was also when I was using Massive, a a VST that I can fully admit I do not understand how to use that fucking thing. No matter how many times I mess around with that, the interface, like I get it a little bit now that I'm like more trained with other synths, but I still hate it. Fuck Massive. I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody, but fuck Massive. It was when I started messing around with Serum, and once I found a synthesizer that like I understood on a more fundamental level, that is when I was able to more like craft sounds from not even necessarily from scratch, but I knew what the knobs I was turning were actually doing, not just like turning it and like, ooh, let's see what happens, which is what I was doing up before that. So like learning how to learning my one instrument and actually getting good at it is kind of what helped put the sound together, because then I started realizing what sounds I actually liked making. Like I started realizing that there are just like certain timbres and certain metallic noises that it just filled me with joy when I heard them. And I kind of just started like pursuing those sounds. And that's I in my mind, like every song I have ever made sounds radically different from the last. With like that in my mind, just every song I've made sounds completely different. But to everybody else who has talked to me about this, like my sound has a at least a very cohesive element that like people like if they hear it in a DJ mix, they'd be like, oh, that's Moris Blak. And I do think part of that was just kind of an obsessive learning with Serum, and eventually once I started making more and more of my own sounds, that became like more like the focus of tracks. No matter what I did, it just sounded like me, and there was nothing I could do about it. I don't know if I'd be a very successful ghost writer, because everything I do, I'm a very untrained musical artist. I'm a very YouTube learned. I always make sure people know that, because I'm not a professional at all. Yeah, hope that helped answer the question a
Yeah,
little bit.
yeah. You think that a lot of your songs sound radically different as you kind of move through making them. How do you balance wanting to experiment and try something new versus trying to stay strategically on brand? Like, is that something going through your mind as you're writing or finishing tracks and planning your releases? You're like, this doesn't quite sound like me. I should change some things. Or I guess, are you trying to push boundaries and span, like, try this, try this?
Yeah, I, I think especially like lately, I so I've been working on a record for a little bit now, which will be coming out in January. And in this record, I still do some of like the mid-tempo stuff, and a lot of the traditional things Morris Blak has done over the years are still present in it. But I also tried to explore different genres. Like I wanted one song that was going to be like more like straight like warehouse techno. I really wanted to do something like that. I wanted to experiment with like drum and bass a little bit, and I wanted like another song to have like a much more melodic vibe than like I normally do. And I've been doing it, and there are times I'm like, okay, this needs to be a little bit harder. Like people come to expect a certain thing from me, but I have noticed that even when I like explore off into other sounds, just I have a very specific method, I guess, when I'm producing tracks. Like all producers have, they're very specific ways that they do things, and those processes kind of all, if they're all being done by the same hand, kind of will culminate in a very similar sound, whether you're trying to be radically different or not. And then there's a lot of tracks that I start writing and I'm like, oh, this is fucking cool. Let's put this in this folder because I want to explore that. We can explore that maybe in a side project or when I decide to radically change my process. And I've also done a little bit of not, I wouldn't say ghost, it's not ghost writing because it's not really a secret that I'm doing it, but doing like producer work for other artists, namely Danny Blue. And that's honestly, those are some of the most fun I've had working on tracks over the past year were probably for Danny Blue, because he has a very pop sensibility, and I was able to just kind of freely explore different melodies and like just being upbeat, because everyone expects my shit to be like dark and gloomy. Like that's just what I do. That's my entire brand. I half my Twitter now is just me talking about horror movies. Like I have to be scary or whatever. And working with Danny Blue, like it's still definitely got some bite to it because he definitely wants to be an industrial artist, but When we explore more of the pop sides, that's when I feel like I'm able to like cut loose a little bit more, be a little less serious, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Do you find that when you get to branch into producing these other things like the songs for Danny Blue, do you have any sense of like renewed energy when you come back to your your personal project?
Yeah, I
Kind of
do,
like
and
refreshing?
yeah, I think that's just like you know, and okay, like I mentioned I was kind of doing a lot of different I'm not a lot of I'm doing some genre shifts in my next record. And I think part of that is kind of inspired by the fact that I had just been doing things between like 85 and 105 BPM for so long, and I was so like focused on that. And we'll be honest, there's been a huge proliferation of mid-tempo artists, which has been very cool to see, but we have definitely reached a bit of an oversaturation point. So that has kind of pushed me to be like, oh, I want to try some other things. I've I've done this mid tempo, and I'm still going to go back to it here and there, but let's try some new things, but still with the attitude that I took towards the mid tempo, and like kind of see what happens. And I'll like frequently, like especially on the weekend when I have full like 2 days to work or whatever, I'll jump between because I'm working on Danny's next record right now. So I'll work on his. I'm also doing production for a metal album for a band right now. So like that is a completely different energy from everything else I'm working on. And so between like my personal work and these like two client works, it's just been nice to like kind of jump between the two and almost like restart my brain every time I start a new project.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds nice. A metal band. What kind of metal is it?
It's like it's this industrial metal band. I won't say who it is yet. It's not like a I won't say it's a huge name, but they are a band that is prolific in their own right, and they are they they are looking to do a radical electronic shift on their direction. We've been like talking a lot. We've been working on some tracks. Like they've been sending over some guitar tracks, and I've been kind of building them up and like building original things. And I think it's very interesting because it's also supposed to be it's a band that's very much has like a self-aware sense of humor, and they kind of want to bring like that energy into the melody and in the structure. So that like when I write that, like sometimes like I will just like put like a fucking pile of weed in front of me and just kind of like blast off into another dimension and just kind of throw whatever crazy idea I have into this metal album, and then when I sober up a little bit, kind of make it sound a little more cohesive. But that has been a very fun project because it's a bit anything goes. So I've been almost trying to approach it with the like energy of like those like really outrageous Japanese extreme metal bands. Like the
Oh
ones that'll
yeah.
like switch between like pop music and trap and then right back to like metalcore. Like that's I'm not going that hard because I just don't those people are geniuses on a plane of existence that I can't even begin to broach. That is the attitude that I'm taking towards writing it.
That sounds like a blast.
It's been awesome.
Very cool.